A dog was walking along the dry outskirts of the city under a high blue sky. The wind was blowing dust across the asphalt, the sun was beating down from above, and there was no shade or shelter in this open area. The dog walked along the road, alone, tired, with its head down. There was a terrible tumor on its head. The skin around it looked cracked and inflamed, red like a burn. In the center of the tumor was a large yellow blister filled with pus. It bulged outward, as if it were about to burst. The fur around it was matted, soaked with pus and dust, making the dog look even more pitiful. At that moment, a car drove by. It didn't stop right away. It just drove down the road, leaving a trail of dust behind it. But after a couple of minutes, it came back. A man got out of the car and slowly approached the dog. He crouched down and carefully examined its head, being careful not to scare it. He sighed heavily, took out his phone, and started calling. The animal ambulance arrived quickly. 2 rescuers got out of the vehicle, a man and a woman. One of them was holding a stretcher, the other a first aid kit and gloves. The dog did not run away. It seemed as if it simply had no strength left. They approached slowly, calmly, without sudden movements. One of the rescuers put on gloves and began to examine the tumor. It looked even scarier up close. The skin was stretched too tight, reddened, and in the center was a bubble, yellow like old pus. The rescuer glanced at his partner and nodded. Carefully, trying not to cause pain, he took a medical lancet and pierced the abscess. Yellow liquid poured out, thick and foul-smelling. The dog flinched but did not howl. Apparently, the pain was familiar. The rescuer carefully squeezed out the pus, washing the wound with antiseptic. Meanwhile, his partner prepared a bandage and began to bandage the dog's head. Everything happened in silence. They had seen this many times before. When all the purulent fluid was gently squeezed out and the wound was washed, there was silence. Only the wind touched the dry grass on the roadside, and in that silence, the rescuers began to carefully bandage the dog's head. The gauze lay in a circle, absorbing the remaining moisture. On top, a clean bandage, which the woman wrapped around the ears and neck, making sure not to squeeze too tight. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, but from responsibility. The dog did not move. Only her eyes opened slightly, as if she was trying to see if the pain was finally going away. Her body was exhausted. In her eyes, tiredness, experienced horror, but without fear. She was letting people help. It was the hardest and most important thing to allow herself to trust. The man bent down and gently picked her up. Her head, wrapped in a bandage, rested helplessly against his chest. She was light, as if a weight had disappeared in her, as if she had given up, tired of fighting alone. They approached the car. The woman had prearranged a blanket in the back seat. Everything was prepared. They acted silently, quickly, but with affection, as if the dog in front of them was not a stray dog, but someone's lost soul. The man gently lowered the dog onto the soft fabric. The dog didn't make a sound. The woman adjusted the bandage once more, made sure it was firm but not too tight, and then the doors closed. The engine rumbled. The car drove down the empty road, away from dust and loneliness, toward new hope. A white van slowly pulled up to the entrance of the veterinary clinic. 2 veterinarians and a nurse were already running out of the door. The rescuers quickly but carefully carried the dog out on a stretcher and into a room filled with the smell of medicine and the sounds of instruments. The inside was cool and clean. The dog was placed on a large metal table, where the veterinarian immediately began his examination. He removed the old bandage, looked carefully at the wound, gently felt the neck and abdomen, checking the general condition. An assistant stood nearby with an IV. She quickly found a vein on the paw and secured the catheter. Transparent fluid began to flow down the tube, giving the dehydrated body its first drops of relief. The vet disinfected the area around the tumor again, treated it with ointment, and applied a new tight bandage, securing it with an elastic bandage. A couple minutes later, The nurse brought a warm blanket and gently covered the dog to keep him warm. The dog's eyes were half closed. He was now lying quietly, no longer shivering. The vet made notes in the patient's chart and said, "She will need a few days of intensive treatment, but the chances are good. She's strong." The rescuers, standing at the door, smiled for the first time in all this time. It seemed there really was hope ahead. Several weeks passed. The swelling on her head was gone, her fur was back where it had been, and there was no more pain in her eyes. Now she was living in the shelter, small but cozy. It smelled of clean bedding and food, and other rescued animals played quietly in their enclosures. Every morning the vet examined her, praised her progress, and gave her a treat. At first the dog looked away incredulously, but now he cautiously came closer, reached out with his muzzle, and accepted the food with a grateful look. Sometimes she let herself be stroked, briefly on the back, and even wagged her tail. The shelter was discussing her fate. Several people had already come to see her. But for now, she stayed here, resting, gaining strength, learning to trust the world anew. She had a new collar around her neck, green with a tag. On the tag was a name, Ray. She had been given a name. She no longer had a tumor. No more pain. Just sunshine and soft blankets and peace. The air in the orphanage was especially fresh that day. The wind fluttered the curtains at the open window, and the sun was soft gold on the tiles. Ray sat by the door of her room as if she sensed something. She stood up when a man with a kind face walked in, the same one who had stopped at the curb then. He held the leash in his hands, and his eyes glittered slightly. "Hi," he said quietly. "Let's go home, shall we?" Ray walked over, slowly at first, tentatively. But then she rubbed her nose into his palm with determination. The shelter workers smiled. She'd chosen her own. When he put the leash on, Ray didn't resist. She turned to them in farewell, one brief glance, and stepped behind the man. Outside, they walked side by side. He took his time, and she walked smoothly, proudly, as if she knew that all the bad things were behind them. The wind played with her fur, and her new green collar shone in the sun. Now she was no longer that sick, lost dog with a tumor on her head. Now she was a beloved friend who had found a home, lying at the feet of a man who had once just stopped on the side of the road.